What's up, everyone? It's a Novelty here from Upgrade Gaming, and I am coming to you today with a video on how to do the legendary questline at the point where you have Garona with you and you're trying to infiltrate the Blade Fury compound. The quest is called an inside job, and it takes a lot of patience. There are a lot of patrolling mobs that I hope that their paths will be clear from this video, and you can kind of see the easiest way, which ones you should take out first, so that you don't get others to sound the alarm. The ability called Sound the Alarm is really the one thing that you have to look out for in this. As you can see, you get this special action button down here in the middle of your screen that whenever that's off cooldown and the little red dot turns white, as it just did, Garona, your companion here, can go up and basically one-shot whatever target you have targeted. She assassinates them, but it also does a little poof on the ground, a little green poof on the ground that if you're near enough to another mob, it will attract them and they will begin to sound the alarm, which gives you, I don't know, it looks like about 3 to 5 seconds to silence them. You can use any regular silence on this ability. So for example, I have Wind Shear I was able to use on them every time they were casting it, if someone was casting it that I didn't have Assassinate up for, which does happen a couple times in this video. First couple times I tried to do this, I attempted going to the right, and I quickly realized that the positioning of the mobs in the center pit there, they're just too close together. There's no room for error, and it might be possible to go that way, but I found that it's a lot easier just to go to the left. In this situation, I also found out that Hex is extremely useful because you can hex a target and not have it pull nearby targets. So I assume this would also work with like Polymorph or any sort of CC that doesn't normally put you into combat. So that was super helpful if you end up into a situation where you have more than one mob trying to sound the alarm and you only have one silence. It's still beatable if that happens. It's not like a deadly flaw as long as you can get there quick enough to cast your polymorph or hex or whatever it may be. That is one thing that's kind of important also in the judgment game of this task, is you have to be able to get there fast enough to stop them from sounding the alarm. And just because you are attacking a mob or using the assassinate function of Garona does not mean that you run any faster than you do throughout the entire time. So you're stuck moving at an extremely slow pace, and just keep that in mind, because if you set someone off to sound the alarm that's around a corner or a little bit too far away, you're just not going to make it there in time to be able to save yourself, and it's a major headache. So I also figured out in testing this that the range on these skirmishers and engineers is pretty far. It's definitely not your usual walking through any area of this expansion or any other expansion really. When you're max level, you kind of get comfortable with the fact that some mobs are just not going to be, or you're not going to attract them when you run semi close to them. But it's important to know that in this quest you have to maintain a really healthy distance from these mobs. So I think just getting the balance between how far away from them you can be and how close you need to position yourself in the event that you do have a little accident and need to use a polymorph or a hex or whatever, and a silence. That kind of balance is like just really important for this quest. And also patience, obviously, as I said earlier. it's a lot of just like waiting for mobs to pat, figuring out how they pat, where they pat. Um, Another thing that will help you when you're trying to figure out the range of these mobs is not only how close you have to be when you can assassinate them, which is a pretty good indication, but also when you assassinate certain mobs, their friends will turn around and kind of look like, hey, what just happened, kind of thing. So you can kind of tell at that point that you were pretty close, or Garona was pretty close on that particular assassinate. So at this point in the video, or in real life, I thought that it was over and I was so excited. It wasn't. I didn't realize that there's a second part. You have to go spy on Gul'dan, and this part didn't. I managed to do it in one shot, which I was really thankful about, but it was really a couple super close calls that had me shitting myself a little bit. So I would pay more attention to this part than I did, but if you're feeling fast-footed, I guess don't worry about it. Um, these mobs are just like really closely spaced. Well, I guess that doesn't make sense. They're really close together. Um, so it's super important that when you're sending Garona, you kind of zoom your camera out much farther than I did and make sure that you're not in a horrible place. Yep, and then I just walked backwards into one. So, yeah, zoom your camera out in this part. It's definitely doable with some mistakes, but it could have been a lot cleaner. And I think this is about the time when I got a brilliant idea to zoom my own camera out. Also, just because you don't use the assassinate button immediately, like if you get too close to a mob and they start to sound the alarm and assassinate is on cooldown or you haven't hit it yet, that doesn't mean you can't still hit it. But the one thing that I did notice is that after you interrupt the sound the alarm cast, it does not happen again in a reasonable period of time. So if you can interrupt it once, you have plenty of time to kill the mob with your own spells, unless you have heinous DPS, in which case I don't know if they cast it again. This last mob I kind of assassinated just to be careful. I was nervous that when I clicked this it would mess everything up. So, the next part cuts to the cutscene, and you may or may not want to watch that. And then after that point in time, it just shows you that you get teleported back out to turn in the quest. So I hope that this was helpful for some of you, and I will see you in my next video.